In a world that's loud, the church does not have to remain silent. In a world that's dark, the church can shine God's light. Welcome to Light Talks, where we dive deep into real conversations, not just echoing the world's noise, but shedding God's light on challenging topics. Let's talk. Welcome back to another episode of Light Talks, where we love to have discussions about the things that you want to know about the Bible and the questions that you have. Thanks for tuning back in. And today, we're going to dive into a topic that is probably very applicable to all of us, and that is finances, money, and how we use those things to God's glory, and how that intersects with our faith. And we have today on Light Talks, back by popular demand, Pastor Michael.
It is great to be here. I don't know why I have a personal interest in finance. I always have, goes back to college, and I can't even tell you what led to it. But I've researched it, I've studied it, I listen to podcasts about it, and I'm excited to talk about it because finances intersect with every area of our life. And if we don't get this right, we're going to get a lot wrong in our life as well.
Yeah, and we love talking about things that you're passionate about. We had that in the first episode because you love science.
I do.
You know, and you've said that in church multiple times, how you just love to research and read and get your brain into that, and finances similarly. Do you know where this interests, is it just you just love the numbers or just trying to manage it, figuring out the best way to do it? Like, what drives that?
It's probably that second thing.
Yeah.
I have a brain that likes to find good solutions and to find an efficient way to handle money, to maximize things. I love to find good solutions for things. So researched it, studied it, and I've got a lot to share.
And we hope, I think, diving into this, we're from a church, and we're talking about money. That's usually, in the world, not a good combination. People don't like to talk about the church and money, or they have bad things to say about it. But when we get into money, God says a lot about money and finances, not exactly maybe how to budget, which are some practical things we want to talk about today. But maybe we should just start with, how does God feel about money? Like, what's the big deal with it? Why is it so important that we get this right?
Well, maybe first of all, we can put everybody's mind at ease. We are not talking about giving to the church in this episode. The common misconception, all the church wants is your money.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that's just not true. And we'll prove it by not asking for any money today. And if anybody gets the impression that somehow we are asking for money or that this is a ploy to get more money, let us know, because that means we got it wrong. That is not at all what we want to do. But it's really incredible how much time the Bible spends talking about money and personal finance. The book of Proverbs is just chock full of advice and wisdom when it comes to how we handle our finances. I don't think this. I know this. God knows who made us. God knows that we very easily fall into the ditch of either putting our confidence and our trust in money, or we might fall off on the other ditch that we fall into despair and hopelessness when it comes to money. And He doesn't want us to fall into either one of those ditches. So our Heavenly Father, who loves us dearly, gives us all kinds of great advice when it comes to money.
Well, let's dive into some of that advice today. I want to start with kind of the topic that the Bible uses to describe us with how we use our money, and it uses the term, or we use the term associated with how the Bible talks about it, is stewardship. And that sounds like a really churchy word. And maybe if you're in a church, you maybe heard of stewardship, but can we talk about that concept of what that means and when it comes to our money? Yeah,
absolutely. I avoid the word stewardship, especially when I'm teaching people that are new to the Bible or new to the Christian faith. It's a word that just doesn't communicate today. Stewardship. If we know anything about the word steward, it might an airline might come to mind or something like that. A steward is simply a manager, and that's the word I prefer to use now. A manager is what God has made us to be when it comes to money. We don't own it. It's not ours. It belongs to God. And we are simply managing what belongs to Him. And our goal, our aim is to please Him with the way we manage what He has entrusted to us. And I think it's important to remember that He's only entrusted it to us for a time, not forever. The joke is you don't see a hearse, with a body in it being, you don't see that pulling a U-Haul because they're not taking it with them. We don't make the hole in the ground big enough to put all the people's stuff in because it's of no use to them anymore. Everything that we earned, everything that we have now goes to our heirs. It goes to somebody else because it was never ours to start with. We don't get to keep it. So it's an important question to ask. Okay, if it's not mine, but it's under my management for a while and only for now, how will I use it? How will I use it to give maximum glory to God, to honor Him with what belongs to Him? How will I leverage it to be a blessing to others and to help others? That's what we need to wrestle with.
I've heard maybe let's dive into that a little bit. I've heard the comment about that where we talk about the money is not ours, it's God's. But I'm the one doing the work for it. I'm the one working for the paycheck, so it feels like mine. So how do we manage that tension?
Yeah, I would say it's ours for a time. It's under our management for a time, and we earned the right to manage it through our work. So, in a sense, it's ours if we understand that term rightly. It's mine to manage for a period of time because of the work that I did. What is work? And we could go on a tangent here if we wanted to, but work is really just money for work is how people thank us for loving them. In exchange for us doing some act of service for them, whether it's collecting their garbage or a doctor who performs a surgery, we are thanking them for their expertise and their love and their service by giving them money, which they then manage for the glory of God. So
when someone sends a bill in the mail, I don't feel like it's my thank you to them. That's probably the tension in all of this.
Sometimes it's an involuntary thing.
Yes, yeah, you have to be thankful for, yeah.
Yep.
So if everything is given to us to manage, then why is contentment such a hard thing? If that's, I think, tied into this is, especially with social media, I can scroll through, see everyone on their big cruise vacations and having so much fun, and I don't have the money to do those things. I wish I did. That gets to be tough, I think. Social media doesn't help, but contentment.
It really doesn't. To always be looking at our neighbor, to be looking next door, to be looking on social media. What do they have? What are they doing? And then comparing it to what I have and what I'm doing. And well, I'm no worse than them, or in fact, in some ways, I'm better. As our human pride comes into play here, and we somehow think that we deserve more or we should have more. We're not content with what we have. It's a huge, huge problem, and probably it's a bigger problem in our culture today than it's ever been in the history of the world or in any other culture. Every single day, we are bombarded with comparing to others, but we're also bombarded with advertisements, hundreds of them, literally every single day. And every advertisement has something in common. They are trying to lead you to be discontent with what you have and where you are until you get their product, and then you will be satisfied, and then you will have enough, except that's just not true. So it's a challenging world we live in today. We got to really tune our eyes to what we're seeing, to understand those advertisements for what they are. They're not trying to sell you a product just in case you happen to need this. We're just making you aware that this exists. That's not what advertisers do. They are trying to sell us on a product by making us discontent and wanting more.
I like that. That's an interesting challenge. Maybe instead of calling them advertisements, we should call them discontentments.
Yes, I like that.
The Super Bowl discontentments were interesting this year. Just like maybe thinking about every billboard we drive by, maybe that can help. That's an interesting thought. I like that.
Yep.
Huh. Okay. So how do we fight against that then, practically?
There's a book. I honestly haven't read it, but I love the title of it. An author named Rachel Cruz wrote a book that's called "Love Your Life, Not Theirs."
Interesting.
And I think the title maybe is enough. Love your life, not theirs. So God gave you your life. Your loving Father in heaven, who adores you and loves you more than you can possibly imagine, has given you what you have, all the material things that you have, and He has provided for you sufficiently. And to remind ourselves, convince ourselves, God is good, and what I have is good because God gave it to me. I should be happy with what I have. One counter to that lack of contentment, a good way to counter it is to keep a gratitude journal, or to be thankful to God regularly and constantly, to thank Him for all that He is and for all that He's given, to be satisfied with what I have, because the truth is every one of us has more than we need. And do we have as much as our neighbor? Do I have the white Corvette like my neighbor down the street? Okay, I'll be honest, I noticed it. Do I have it? No, I don't, and that's okay. I can be content and happy without that. God didn't entrust one of those to me because he knew better that I wouldn't need it, or that I might kill myself driving it, or for whatever reason, God decided I don't need that white Corvette. So to be content with what we do have, understanding our Father is good and He gives us every good thing. That's the key, I think.
Yeah, and isn't that so hard sometimes when you're struggling, or when the budget is tight, or when you really, you want to be able to do things, and seeing everyone else doing that, gratitude must I think has to be the thing that you run to.
Exactly.
It might look different for each person, but there's so much we have to be thankful for, and especially maybe in this culture in particular. Is a reason we need to be more thankful, because we're bombarded with all those discontentment messages.
Yeah, and it is a struggle. I still struggle with it. I can't count the number of times I've seen something that's advertised. I didn't know it even existed seconds before. I see it, and suddenly I got to have it.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy anymore until I can get that thing that I didn't even know existed. And I was perfectly fine without it, but all of a sudden it triggers something in my mind, and then you start wanting it. The Bible calls that coveting, wanting something that you necessarily shouldn't have or need. It calls it a lack of contentment, and it can eat at our soul. And the truth is, it's like an appetite. It's never going to be satisfied. We can buy and buy and buy, and we're never going to have enough. We're never going to say, okay, now I'm there. Now I've got everything I need. I don't need to buy more now. We just don't ever get there.
Yeah. Maybe a great assignment for everyone listening to this podcast or watching it is sit down and think about intentionally what you're thankful for. And that reminds me of a guy in our church, Mike, who did a gratitude spreadsheet.
Yes.
Pastor Mike, I think, had a message, and he took the challenge of, can you find, I don't remember what the number was, 50?
It was 100.
It was 100 things you're grateful for?
Pastor Mike said, write down something for every letter of the alphabet, or that you're thankful for. And Mike kind of came back and said, I could do 100 for every letter of the alphabet. And Pastor Mike said, prove it, do it. And he did. He had 2,600 things that he was thankful for. It took him a long time to do it, but he came up with 2,600 things.
I think he even said it forced him to dig a little deeper. Like, stoplights. If we didn't have stoplights, this place would be a mess. Trying to get anywhere would be a mess. Yep. Being thankful that, stoplights exist. Even just the small things, a shovel. That makes work so much easier. Yeah. We don't think about those things and the blessings that we do have. So maybe a challenge.
I haven't seen his list yet, but I'd love to see the Q's and the X's. I'm really curious.
Xylophones.
He's very thankful for the Queen of England. I'm not sure. There's no
Queen
there now,
mattress. Yes. That's. I think the point is, though, there's so much to be thankful for that we don't see and we don't think about.
Yep.
But when we put our minds on those things, that can open us up into a land of contentment, maybe a lot more than we've ever seen.
It puts our mind in a new space. We reframe things, and it changes our whole attitude.
And this also makes me think of my kids. Someone asked me, like, what are some tips for raising kids? And it made me think, wow, you know what? My girls are actually really good kids. That's a gift from God. They're not wild. They're just kind of good kids. And that's a blessing that I can be thankful for. Maybe I didn't really think much about before. Things like that, you just don't always see how God blesses you all the time.
Yeah. There's a passage in Philippians chapter 4 where Paul talks about the secret of contentment. There's a famous verse that you see on posters, usually with a guy on the top of a mountain with his arm raised. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. As if you can climb a mountain with God's strength. But if you look at the context, it's actually talking about contentment. Maybe our listeners can open up to Philippians 4 and read that whole context. Paul had some extreme struggles in life. He also had some extreme blessings. And he said, I learned the secret of contentment in any and every situation. And I can be content. I can do all this, referring to contentment, through him who gives me strength. And that's the context for that verse. But it really is a supernatural power we need to tap into in order to have the contentment that we need.
I can be content through God who gives me strength.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great tip with the passage. Yeah. All right, let's get practical a little bit. So the Bible doesn't tell us how to allot our budget specifically, But we all have to manage our money somehow. So let's get into some of the tips. Where do we even start with budgeting and managing our money? It can be so overwhelming looking at all the different ways all the different places our money has to go, that we're doing the right things with it. Where do we start with that?
Yeah, it's actually simpler than people realize. Spend less than you make. All right. So
All right.
close the cup. Thank you for joining us.
That's a wrap. Yeah.
No, the math really is that simple. Are you spending less than you make? And yet, it's harder in our modern world than just that, right? So when I was a missionary in Russia for 12 years. When we first got back to America, we went through a month or two of spending American style now, and getting our household established. And my wife and I, about a month and a half, 2 months after being back in the States, looked at each other and we said, "Are we making it? Are how much are we spending? Are we spending less than we make?" And we both looked at each other like, I don't know, no idea. We didn't like that feeling.
Yeah.
So right then and there, for the first time in our lives, we didn't have to do this in Russia because there just wasn't much to buy there, and it was extraordinarily inconvenient to buy things. So we didn't really need to budget while we lived there. But we realized that once we were back in the States, we really needed to, because there's stuff like Walmart where you can easily blow money without even thinking about it. So we decided, okay, let's track all of our expenses. So, and I think that's a great place for people to start. If you want to know if you're spending less than you make, you got to know what you're spending. So we just pinky swore that we were going to write every single expense that we had on the spreadsheet that I made. And there are apps for that now, but we just used a spreadsheet. So we started that in 2007 when we returned from Russia. And literally, if we buy a pack of gum at the grocery store, it goes on the list, even if that's all you bought. Actually, we agreed if it's less than $1, you don't have to put it on there. But everything $1 and more goes on that spreadsheet, which means we know exactly where our money is going. We know exactly how much we've spent. And it's actually a really peaceful feeling to know, even if the picture isn't pretty, at least you know exactly where you stand compared to your income. So that's a good place to start. Start recording and tracking all of your expenses. You can use a spreadsheet. You can use a budgeting app like EveryDollar, or just Google a budgeting app, and that's where you can start tracking your spending. Once you've got your spending being tracked, then you can also now pre-plan where you're spending, and that's all a budget is. A predetermined plan on where my money is going to go. I'm going to tell my money where to go rather than it just running away. And it's a predetermined spending plan is what a budget is.
Are you still making that? Is that spreadsheet still going, or is that how you started?
That spreadsheet is still active. We still keep it. If you ever want to know what we spent on groceries in 2011 in January, I can look it up for you.
You can look it up? Wow. That's impressive. I think for me personally, that sometimes that's the hang up, is that you gotta spend time working on it.
Yes.
You gotta open up the Excel, you gotta sit there and you gotta type. And it's easier not to do that.
It is a pain. I won't lie about that. Tracking anything is, but what you measure can change. And that's true of every area of our life. If we're not going to measure it, if we're not going to track it, it's probably not going to change. Whether we're trying to lose weight, here's a good tip for that. Start counting calories. It's a pain in the butt to do it.
Yeah.
But when you do, you start to see that the pounds fall off because you know how many calories you're taking in a day. If you want to be more efficient with your time, you keep a schedule, you keep a calendar, and you put things on a to-do list, because you'll get more done that way when you pre-plan and intentionalize and record how your time is being spent or where it's going to be spent. And the same is true of our money. If we want to be intentional with it, we got to record it. Does it take time? It sure does. Is it a pain? Yeah, it kind of is. But it's worth it because you know exactly where your money is going, and you'll rein in the spending.
Isn't that true of a lot of things in life, that usually the harder path is the better path?
Yes. It's
in so many different ways. And
it's the path of discipline.
It really,
discipline
it really
isn't
is.
really that fun.
No, it's not.
But it really pays dividends, both figuratively and literally.
Like going out for a jog, it hurts running.
Yes, it does.
But it's so good for you. So same thing with budgeting.
Yep.
So do you have any tips when it comes to sitting down and making a budget on how and where to allocate your money to? Or have you found any good percentages, or just tips? This goes first, that goes second.
It's a little bit hard just because there are so many different income levels and there are so many different budgets. It's hard to say, 10% should go toward food, because if you make $300,000 a year, it probably shouldn't be 10%. And if you have $30,000 coming in, it'll probably be more than 10%. So it's hard just to give a flat percentage. As far as priorities go, I recommend, and somebody will probably leave a comment about this, here's the part where you ask for money. I'm just telling you what I do. We put giving as our very first budget item. If you don't intentionalize the giving, if we don't intentionalize generosity, and if we just give what's left over, that's not really generosity anymore. Think about what that's saying to God when you just give God your leftovers. I don't think that's puts a smile on his face. If I had somebody I highly respected coming to dinner at my house, some celebrity or sports star or whoever, they come to my house and they're going to have dinner. I don't get out last night's meatloaf and throw it in the microwave and have a meal that way. I don't give them the leftovers. I give them a nice meal. I give them the best. I might make a steak or something. And I want to do that for God too. So off the top, before I spend anything, the very first budget item is, this is the percentage, this is the amount that we're giving for generosity and for the church. Well, after that, you got to budget out your four walls first. And by four walls, I mean your absolute essentials. Food. You want to eat this month. What's the minimum amount you're going to have for food? Make sure you've got that, because you don't want to starve. It's kind of important. Your housing. Make sure you've got the money allocated for mortgage or rent so that you've got a place to live indoors, because living indoors is kind of nice.
It's kind of important, yes.
So that's absolutely critical. Transportation. Most people rely on transportation to get to their work. If you live someplace with a bus system, that might be an exception, but you still need money for that. But make sure you've got your car paid for and gas allocated. Otherwise, you're going to lose your job and you're going to lose your income. So that's critically important too. Your utilities. It's nice to have running water. So make sure that that's budgeted first. Okay, so once those essential things are budgeted, now you can look at what number is left. Now we can start allocating that to things of lesser importance.
When you were talking about that, it made me think of something I think maybe we should bring up what do you think about having accountability partners for your budget? Because I feel like we live in a society where numbers are private. Money is private. No one should know how much I make. No one should know how much I spend.
Yeah.
What about a good accountability partner? Is that a good recommendation?
I think that's critically important. And sometimes it can be your spouse. Having even somebody outside of your family that you regularly meet with, especially if you're trying to get out of debt or you have some big goals, I think that's really important. We did that for some friends back at the old church we were at. Close personal friends of ours decided they wanted to get out of debt, and they had over $60,000 worth of debt that they needed to dig out of, and they needed accountability and help. So we sat down with them, we helped them with their budget, and we decided we're just going to meet every month and see where you're at, see how you're doing. And month by month, they met. We saw their progress. We celebrated the steps they were taking. We saw the number declining. I believe it was 18 months that it took. And this was a family with a 5-figure income. They weren't 6 figures or up. They paid off $60,000 in 18 months just through intentionality and through accountability. Those two things made all the difference.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like the numbers don't add up.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear something like that, how do the numbers work? Which maybe is something you could speak to because you have 6 kids. Yeah. And what do they say? How much does a kid cost to raise today?
I don't know, $400,000 or $500,000 per kid, they say.
How many millions of dollars? I mean, the numbers don't seem to work. It feels like that, at least.
It does seem like they don't work. And I don't know where they get that number. That number has definitely not been true for us because we literally haven't had that much income in our lives to have paid for that many children. And yet here we all are, and we're happy and healthy. So the general numbers, I think, are estimates. And I have no idea where they get them. What we have found is that when we are faithful, when we are intentional, when we put our priorities straight, the Lord provides. And I know that sounds a little bit hokey or miraculous or just a leap of faith. It's that, but it's not quite that. We worked hard, mm-hmm. and we had to be really focused in order to do it. My wife would go at our old place in Omaha. We had a Hy-Vee right across the street, a grocery store right across the street, and a Walgreens. And every single week they would have their loss leaders. How much you could items that they sell for a loss in order to get you in the store, so you'll buy other stuff. So every week my wife would figure out what the loss leaders were at both Walgreens and at Hy-Vee, and they always had a limit on those, limit of 2. So 5, 6 kids in tow, my wife would go over there and literally they would all be in line and hand the money down to the next one in line, the next one in line. And we got
Work
our
the
limit
system.
of 2 times 6 or 7. And,
Work the system. Yeah.
we were able to save a lot of money doing that for our groceries anyway. Just, driving the used cars and just whatever we could do to save the money. And we were never lacking. We were never in want. We never felt poor. And through all this time, we always prioritized giving first. That always came off the top, and the Lord always provided. We were also always saving for the future, saving for retirement. We have lived a debt-free life our entire life, other than right after we got married. My wife had a $3,000 student loan that we paid off within 2 or 3 months, and then that was the last debt we've ever had. Well, other than our mortgage, we do still have a mortgage.
Yeah.
That we took on in 2016. That was our first house we ever owned, was when we came here to Appleton. And we're currently scheduled to have that paid off in 2027. So about 2.5 more years, we should have our house paid for too.
Nice.
So the Lord does provide when we
Yeah.
are intentional, when we are focused, when we use what He's given us to the best of our ability to give Him glory. Somehow it works.
I've often thought that God can work beyond the math. I think sometimes we feel like the math is an absolute certainty. The numbers have to add up, but God can work beyond that. And it seems, at least in my own personal experience, it feels like the math didn't add up, but somehow we're here in certain things. I remember thinking we had an older car, and I remember realizing one day, I haven't had to take this into the shop for probably 4 years.
Hopefully changing the oil, though.
Oh yeah, other than basic, oil changing, maybe new tires. But I remember thinking, just a light bulb moment, maybe God has been miraculously holding these parts together, and that's how He's provided for us, because we haven't had to spend money there.
Yeah.
Things like that. Maybe I've often thought God may intervene in certain ways we can't see to help us and provide for us.
If you look at Pastor Mike's rusted out minivan, there is clearly divine intervention
Yes.
that's keeping that thing from falling apart.
That is very true. Yes, He does provide in mysterious ways sometimes, but we don't always see that. It goes back to the gratitude thing of just seeing how God does provide us. Sometimes not financially, but it does add up. So let's get into a little bit more now into debt, because I'm
Let's not
sure
get into debt.
let's talk about
okay.
debt and discuss it. Is debt sinful?
That is a great question. Based on what the Bible says, we would have. Let me just give a direct answer. No, debt is not sinful. The Bible never says that it's sinful, but it does say repeatedly that debt is unwise. So sometimes the best question to ask is not what is allowable or what is moral. Those are good questions, but especially the moral question. We don't want to do anything immoral. But maybe even a better question, or the next question is, well, what is the wise thing to do? And God blesses wisdom. So if we're not wise with our money and we aren't following God's principles and we are going into debt, God's not mad at us. He's not going to send us to hell for that. And there's really nothing, perhaps nothing to be forgiven there. But it sure is unwise, and it sure is adding stress, and it's enslaving us to somebody else because we owe money to them. And there's just so many unwise things about being in debt, and the Bible does warn about that repeatedly. Throughout the Proverbs, there are so many. Actually, I wrote a couple of them down here. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Like if you owe somebody money, they own you in a sense until you pay them back. So it's an unwise thing to do. Debt, not sinful, but certainly not wise.
So is there such a thing as good debt, though? If people who work in the financial businesses I'm not an expert in this, but they use debt to their financial gain, where it can be beneficial in building wealth or things like that, or investments. So is there wise debt, could you say?
You hear that a whole lot, and I disagree. I think none of it's good. None of it's good. None of it's great. Some of it is necessary sometimes, perhaps. I don't know too many people that would buy a house if we couldn't get a mortgage.
Yeah.
So that'd be an example of maybe a necessary debt, even though it's still not great. And even though I think it's good to get out of it as soon as you can, get out of that debt, that mortgage debt. So is it good though? I still think, people say that once they've paid off their house, their grass feels different under their feet as they walk on it. Like, this is all mine now. The bank doesn't own any of it. There's got to be some truth to that. I'm looking forward to finding out in a couple of years. But
Please tell us
I'll
what it
let you
feels
know
like.
if it feels that great or not. But I got to imagine that's got to be a feeling of freedom, that I don't owe a penny to anybody in the world, and I'm completely independent with my finances. That's got to feel great, and that's just a wise way to live, right?
Yeah. Well, so what about something that's very practical for a lot of people is we have credit cards.
Yep.
So should we be using credit cards? Should we not be using credit cards? Wisdom there for us?
They're dangerous. Again, nothing sinful here. It's not a moral issue. If you use credit cards, God's not shaking his fist at you. But is it wise? So credit cards, they encourage you to spend more than you have. There have been studies on this, that when you spend cash for something, it activates pain centers in your brain. You are giving something away that doesn't come back to you, and in exchange, you're getting a product, and yet there's the pain of having lost that money that you can no longer spend on anything else. When you spend with a credit card, you don't even look at the price half the time, right? You just give them this piece of plastic, they swipe it, they give the piece of plastic back. You actually got back what you gave, and then you walk on your way and find out later how much you owe. It's just painless, which isn't a wise way to spend either. Create as many pain points as you can in your spending, which sounds counterintuitive, but make it painful, and you'll probably spend less and you'll spend more wisely, which means for a lot of people, spending with cash is actually a better way to go.
That sounds a lot, especially if any of our listeners have ever listened to Dave Ramsey.
Oh, he's my idol.
Yeah, yeah.
In a good way, not in a sinful way.
Yes. And he talks a lot about that. It hurts. And he encourages things like groceries or certain expenses to pull the cash out and pay with cash for that very reason. Mm-hmm. It makes you think twice about what you're buying.
Yeah. Your spending goes up when you use a credit card. A lot of people say, well, I want to get the points, or, the travel points or the cash back. Repeated studies have shown that when credit is used, you spend more. So if you would have used cash, you would have spent 10% less, 20% less, but you're getting 2% cash back. Well, the math doesn't add up there. Spend the cash and save more money than you would get with your cash back anyway.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, that can be so hard. But maybe that's just something for everyone listening to just think about. Where am I with my credit cards, and how do I use them, and am I planning my use? I think there are some people who are so disciplined, numbers, Excel spreadsheets,
yes,
that using a credit card is not hard because they've already planned for each one of those dollars and they track them.
Yeah. And so full disclosure, we do use credit cards, but our pain point is that spreadsheet. So it's almost like spending cash for us, because every transaction I use with a credit card goes on the spreadsheet. My wife will review that, and it's functionally, painfully equivalent to cash in my system. And some people might disagree. I'm cheating a little bit with using credit cards, but they're paid off in full every month, always, because I know exactly how much we've been spending and how much we have coming in to pay for that credit card. And by recording it on the sheet, I'm limiting our spending that way.
So maybe that's a question everyone should ask themselves is, do I have a pain point for when I spend my money? And if I don't, maybe I need to get rid of the credit cards and do debit cards so I see that money come out of my account every time there's a transaction.
Comes out immediately. Debit cards are a little bit more painful than credit, just because you do see the subtraction happen immediately.
Yeah. How about student debt?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to go to college, and you almost have to get a student loan. Most people probably get there and college costs are increasing. Is student debt okay?
I prefer if people would approach it by saying, nope, I'm not going to do that. Just take it off the table. And you would be surprised at how you can think of other solutions when you take it off the table. It's not an option. Okay, well then now what am I going to do? And it shapes your decisions. So 5 of our kids, our 5th is currently in college. The other 4 have all graduated from college. 6 kids, pastor salary. We couldn't pay for our kids' college. We did give them a number. Hey, we'll pay for $3,000 a year, $5,000 a year, whatever it was, with each child. All four of them, the fifth is still in there, all four of them were able to graduate debt-free from college. Our daughter actually had, a full disclosure, a $3,000 debt. She could have paid off immediately. It was what she got her freshman year. It was a subsidized loan. So she thought, just in case I'm going to need it, she took it. And then she paid it off like immediately after she graduated. But otherwise, our kids worked hard. They worked throughout the summer. They worked a lot of hours, and it didn't hurt them, didn't kill them. It gave them a good work ethic, and they were able to pay for college. Our fifth daughter actually started college with enough in the bank with the money that we promised to give for college too. She's got college paid for. She'll graduate debt-free too.
That's pretty awesome. And I know we have kids approaching college as well, and we've had those conversations. I wondered if you're like someone who wants to go to be a doctor. That's
a tough one.
That's a big bill
Doctor
to pay.
or lawyer or dentist. Dentist is actually the worst, I think.
Really?
It's super high fees with that. Those are definitely the hardest. You can usually find hospitals or practices that will help pay for that so that you can do it debt-free. Or military is sometimes an option where you can get the training for free through the military. So there are ways to do it, but it's definitely the hardest professions to do without debt.
Do your research.
Yep.
Search out ways to do that. One thing I was thinking about too with just practically, I know you talked about the Excel spreadsheet that we use the Dave Ramsey app, the Every Dollar app, which is our way of setting our numbers. And each time a transaction comes in, you have to put it in the right category, and it tells you how much remaining. One of the hardest things for us, maybe you can speak to this, is trying to plan for things like vacations or new cars or bigger purchases for the house, like furniture. Trying to allocate room in a budget for those bigger expenses down the road, it feels like we struggle with the things we need for this month, and the regular expenses keep eating up some of that money. So then we can't, if our car blows up tomorrow, we're not there yet. Yep. Trying to manage the future as well as a personal struggle. I don't know if you have tips for that.
It's hard. I don't want to diminish the fact that with inflation and wages not keeping up with inflation, it is really hard these days to make ends meet. So I want to be sympathetic to people who, especially those with a lower income, it's really hard to make it ends meet, to just take care of today's needs, much less planning for those future expenses. But again, I'd say prioritize the most important things. Pay yourself first. Put those things maybe in a separate bank account so you don't see them. It's okay to create multiple accounts at your bank. And your checking account has the money that's in and out, but I've got these other accounts where I'm saving for the car, saving for vacation, and you'll be a lot less tempted to spend it when it's just not even visible to you. And when it automatically comes out, automate whatever you can. That's also a good tip that helps you save for the future. So
we've tried to, whenever we put that money in our budget, think of it like we paid that. And then we do an actual transfer to like a savings account. Yeah. So it feels like
it's gone.
It feels like it's already been used. That's what we're trying to do as best we can, but it is hard. It really is tough. Yeah. But what about like a vacation? Is it wrong to plan or spend money on a vacation when you have these needs that you have to plan for? Where does that fit in the mix? Or other fun things that you like to do, maybe hobbies?
Yeah, I think you have to prioritize everything. That's why those first four things, put those first. A vacation is not a moral right. Vacations are nice. I enjoy vacations, but if we don't take one, we're going to be okay. We're going to survive that. And there are ways you can do things. You can go to Disney World and you're going to spend a whole bunch of money, or you can go camping an hour away and you'll still get away. You'll still spend time with your family, and you're going to spend a whole lot less money. So it's still a getaway. It's still a reset for your brain. It's still rest, but we're not owed the Disney vacation.
Which goes back to the consumerism and the culture of discontentment. Yep. If I don't make it to Disneyland, I will never have lived my life to the fullest.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you will. You don't have to go to Disney World. Actually, I don't. I've got a relative that has been to Disney like every year for decades. Like that, they're just the Disney people. And I just don't get that personally. Even if I was a multimillionaire, I wouldn't go to Disney probably.
We went once, And I told my wife we're going to the Star Wars park at Disney
Well,
because
that I would
I
do.
grew up with Star Wars. If I'm going to experience something, I'm going to live in my Star Wars because that was my childhood. It was great. We had fun, and we're done.
Yep.
Not going back.
I would go for that.
You would go for that? All right. Make sure you budget for it, though.
Yes, for sure. We'll have it prepaid.
Okay. Any other kind of just thoughts or things that you had that are tips for people that maybe are struggling with trying to get going on this, get in the right place? Anything else you want to tell people with budgeting and finances, wisdom?
As I mentioned before, I am a Dave Ramsey fan. I've taught Financial Peace University. I think it's a 9-lesson course that teaches you the basics of personal finance and also teaches you how do you make a budget and all these things that we've been talking about. They're laid out in that course. I love it. I think it's well organized. It's actually entertaining. You wouldn't think that personal finance could be entertaining in any way, but there's a lot of emotion to it. There's a lot of great stories that are attached to it, and I just really love the program. So that's what I would recommend to people. Go through Financial Peace University. You can find one locally and do it with other people. I think that's the best way to do it, but you can also do it online. Just sign up and do it on your own time with you and your spouse if you're married, or just by yourself if you're not. But again, if you're by yourself, try to find an accountability partner because I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, because we were never taught personal finance, which I think I've heard more high schools and are trying to start incorporating into their curriculum, practical money management and how to do it. So I think part of what happened for me is I've never been taught how to do this.
Yep.
And I went through that program and taught it a couple times too. So I agree. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, and don't feel shame if you don't know, if you haven't been taught, if things aren't going well and you feel things are off the rails. Don't feel shame about that. Just take some steps and time to learn, time to find the best practices and learn from this course. So just take some steps.
Maybe one little sample from that is Dave Ramsey talks a lot about tackling your debt like a gazelle. He uses the gazelle imagery, chase after, like that family that you talked about. Really prioritize, we got to get through our debt so that we can start moving forward personally.
Make it emotional. That's maybe what I would recommend. What is your why? That's super important. We want to get out of debt. That's not a goal. Why do you want to get out of debt? Well, we want the freedom. We want to be able to travel the world. We want to make sure we leave a legacy for our children. Whatever your why is, make it big, make it emotional. Agree on it together if you're married. Dream in vivid technicolor to make that it is emotional and visceral as possible, and that's what will motivate you to make some pain points now to achieve future goals. If we lack maturity, we do what we want to do now. We think about this moment. That's a lack of maturity if that's what we're doing. But a mature person is going to be thinking about the future. I can defer pleasure right now for a future goal and a future pleasure that's more important. I think that's important for us to do.
That's something that I have in my mind. We're to the point where we pretty much have our house off. We do have a car debt because our one car blew up way earlier than it was supposed to. But we're kind of scheduled to get out of finish our mortgage about the time our kids are going to be out of the house. So that's kind of like a line that at least I see coming for us. And that kind of drives me. All right.
Yeah.
My wife and I will be able to maybe do more traveling or go on vacation together because we don't have a mortgage that we have to pay for or put more money towards retirement. So that then we can do those things. Thinking about the future, I think, is a huge piece to this.
Yeah. And maybe just a note to those that are younger that are joining us, starting early is so important. The secret of compounding interest is time. So if you can do this early, if you can start it now, you'll be amazed at where you end up, and it really is an amazing thing.
This just made me think of something that maybe we should talk about quick. I hear this all the time with Black Friday deals, Amazon Prime Day. It's so much cheaper right now, so I got to buy it because I'm saving money. I'm saving money if I buy it now.
Look at what you're spending, not what you're saving. That's my advice.
Okay. Well, that's pretty simple. Does it fit in your budget?
Does it fit in the budget? Have you pre-planned it? Any big purchases, always put off at least a day, maybe a week, as you think about it, and let the initial emotional rush of wanting to buy it subside. Think about it rationally. Talk about it with your spouse or your accountability partner before you make that big purchase. But I've been trying to tell my wife that our 65-inch TV keeps shrinking every year. It's a weird thing, and I'm pretty sure we need another
70?
one. So I always start planting the seed about 3 years before I want to replace it.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's where we're at right now. So I got a couple more years before we can do that.
Maybe there's some wisdom to spending the entire year saving money so that when the Black Friday comes along or whatever, the Cyber Monday, those deals, then you can buy it at a less amount because you've already saved the money up. And then
Exactly.
it's like a new Christmas.
Yeah. By this November, I think that TV might be too small to view. So
So it's going
we're going to have to start saving for that.
to start saving, huh? Maybe finish saving. Well, there's probably one big area we have not covered, but we'd love to cover that in a future area. That is marriage and money.
Yeah.
How do you work with your spouse? And we're already at time today, but I would love to continue this conversation. But that's a huge area of, is it still the most common cause of divorce is financial disagreements?
It's definitely one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one.
And-
It can cause divorce. It can cause marital strife and fighting. Super important to get on the same page when it comes to finances.
And I'm sure maybe some people are thinking, well, what, are you going to talk about that?
We are. Just not today.
Just not today, yes. But we'll come back and we'll address that. And if you have any questions specific to finances, to what we've talked about today, please go into the description and find the link for where you can submit your questions. We love to see those. If there's something specific that Pastor Michael is talking about today with debt or with credit cards or with planning or things a question that came up that we maybe didn't talk about, we would love to hear from you. So that we can answer some more of those questions and dive a little bit deeper to specific questions that you have about finances. But for today, Pastor Michael, thanks for being here for another episode.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.
We'll probably have you back again. Don't worry.
See what the people want.
We'll see what the people want. If you want Pastor Michael back, leave a comment. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Light Talks, and we'll see you next time.